A drop of water, and then another, droplet after droplet, ring after ring, soon to be rain, falling in bunches. Particles of hydrogen breaking the atmosphere, slowly and surely forming in grey long drags above the sky, eventually from condensation turned back from the atmospheric water vapor into lances thrown by gravity onto the ground. Wetting everything, like a swimmer falling into a pool, causing water to jump skybound, and then hit the cement yet again. The soft rain of summer is once again propelled away by the cold winter exterior of rain. In many ways, that's what the 1995 movie August in the Water is about. The perpetual motion of liquid. A perpetuation pushed onto time and its distortion caused by the waviness of the water ripples themselves. Directed by one Gakuryu Ishii, an eccentric Japanese director whose style can only be described as punk, early on in his career most of his movies kept this raw tone, which not a lot of Japanese movies featured at the time. In 1994, while directing a movie called Angel Dust, he decided to shift his style of filmmaking because he wanted to challenge himself to something new. But also because it had been very difficult to find funding for these types of films he made before. During this period, he would direct two extremely interesting and almost dreamlike movies. Films that were less plot-driven and more about their atmosphere. One of those movies is the one we'll talk about today, August in the Water. What I said in this video's introduction essentially summarizes the intangible feeling the opening offers. It is an eclectic work, distinguished by a cohesive aesthetic that nonetheless serves as a testing ground for numerous directorial flourishes. The result is an ethereal, almost sporific mood that settles over the viewer, as its disparate elements cohere an effect heightened by a superb original soundtrack that fuses traditional Japanese percussion with shimmering synthesizers, which produce an almost water-like sound. Every element of this film moves with the fluidity of water, a quality that emerges from the very architecture of its story. From the very beginning, whatever we're shown and told is almost spiritual in its seeping quality. We're told, at the beginning, that a new black hole created by a supernova started signaling to Earth using its magnetic field. The film shows us a tablet showing a series of events, almost predicted ahead of time. The light of the tablet turns into a rainbow, and we're told that afterwards, two meteorites struck in two places at once. As the light of the rainbow turns into the light refracting of the water from a pool, a person swimming through the aquarium as two boys watch them. The soundtrack constructs this moment in a contemplative manner. The two boys see an unknown creature in this girl who emerges out of the dolphin's enclosure, just to be scolded by her trainer. Her name is Izumi. This sequence functions as a thematic bridge between the film's cosmic prologue and its human narrative. The transition from a supernova signaling through magnetic fields to a prophetic tablet to refracted rainbow light that dissolves into the shimmering surface of a pool establishes a visual and conceptual continuity between astronomical phenomena and earthly life that is present throughout the entire film. It's also symbolic in its numerological quality. Two meteorites striking simultaneously represent the two boys witnessing the girl in the aquarium. Both pairs represent dual events that carry a sense of synchronicity and an after effect with consequences, as we'll see. As for her name, Izumi means spring, fountain or source of water. Given the entire movie emphasis on water, refraction and emergence, her name is most certainly intentional and places the character under the role of a living conduit between realms. Again, something we'll discuss later. The two boys are introduced by the aquarium manager Nakajima to Izumi. Their names are Ukiya and Mao, which also bear symbolic meaning deriving from the story's character arcs for them. Mao, being written like the kanji for true fish, is the one who swims, a creature of water, fully immersed in that element. Ukiya means to float, either on a surface like a body of water or between two things, maybe even to avoid being immersed in the liquid itself. It's also established here that while Mao's name is written as the kanji for true fish, he cannot swim, initially contradicting his role in the story. Ukiya is presented for the most part under the role of the group's irreverent trickster, while Mao's more solemn disposition renders him the quietly contemplative counterpart that balances their duo. Mao was more likely to be in thought while Ukiya cracks jokes, and this applies for most scenes featuring their dynamic. Shortly after this scene, there's a scene of Izumi performing a high dive. As it was established earlier, she's Japan's shining hope for the high dive. This scene culminates in a title drop, August in the Water. Now, as to what the title might mean, I initially thought for it to be a simple thing. In the movie, there's multiple scenes showing a water throwing festival, the Hakata Gyon Yamakasa, which is a festival celebrated in Hakata, the city world where the action takes place. I'd assumed that since this is a summer festival it would occur in August, but upon inspection, Hakata Gyon Yamakasa is celebrated in July, so that couldn't be it. I think this may have something to do with the fact the movie's action ends in August, so I'll talk about that when I get to it. The next scene that immediately follows the title drop shows the storm arriving, Izumi running from home to school, using her bag as a makeshift umbrella. Through the rain we see a guy on a motorcycle stop near her. They stare at each other while the rain pours over them, and as he raises his visor we realize it's Mao. As the music grows louder, there's no need for words, it's just them in the water. I love the rain, the feeling of the warm downpour in summer, the dream of the hot scorch ending to let the anger of the sky mellow atmosphere. To me, this scene feels immensely beautiful. It's a wordless culmination. As she gets on his motorcycle, they ride together through the rain. A perfect moment captures what I will describe as a reversed proverb. Not the calm before the storm, but rather the storm before the calm. Yet even this formulation only approximates the film's texture. This scene has stuck with me for so much time, because every element of it, wordless as it is, drags itself closer to being the identifying role for these characters than any interaction. But it doesn't last. They arrive at school. She thanks him for the ride and goes to class. As he backs off, he slips and falls into a puddle. After that, a timelapse of the puddle drying shows us a scorch arrived immediately after the rain, causing a drought. In the next scene, we see Mao and Ukiya on the school's rooftop, skipping class, discussing about the Hakata Gyon Yamakasa, and about how they'll get water for the festival since there's an ongoing drought happening in the city. On the radio, they also speak about a mysterious illness affecting the city. Ukiya asks Mao if he knows things are happening in the universe, like the fall of the meteorites and the explosions of supernovas, which seem to be signs of bad omens. Miki is one of Ukiya's friends who's obsessed with astral readings and a religious belief. Likewise to the other characters, her name in the archaic form means divine offering, or alternatively seawater. Although both of these are just speculative because, unlike the main cast, her role is quite minimal in the story. Although she does aid the main cast multiple times with readings of the supernatural or spiritual. Ukiya mentions he's scared of dying, and he feels like all of them will die soon, before getting to achieve anything in their lives. Fact that keeps him awake at night. Izumi shows up on the roof and they end up skipping class together. She shows up and speaks how her brother-in-law, being an archaeologist and researcher, entered a historic site which was found not long after the fall of the meteorites. In this site he had found a stone tablet which appeared to be like an ancient computer. Ukiya asks if he can come over and speak to her brother-in-law on Sunday, and she agrees. After she leaves, Ukiya points out that he felt like her and Mao were flirting. Although he was doing the exact same thing with her. In a lot of ways, August in the Water story is based on the occurrences and happenings which coincide with each other and clash. Two meteorites fall simultaneously on Earth, and two boys fall at the same time for the same girl. Although as established earlier, their names are what determine much of their fates. The work features heavy symbolic pairings and such dual events, one happening outside the control of the characters and one in control. The same day, Ukiya goes to visit Miki and talk about his compatibility with Izumi, but it ends up missing a terrifying detail. Her sign is extraordinary, but their match just isn't meant to be. After this, we get a quick scene establishing Ukiya and Mao's friendship. There's no inherent reason for the scene of them just lighting fireworks in the parking lot of a Lawson's, but to me, a lot of the choices like that, the slow cinematography, the ethereal soundtrack, and the moments of silence are what punctuate this movie's fabric. There's this phrase said among circles online, and even throughout real life. They don't make them like they used to. That phrase, no matter what happens, unfortunately ends up true in this case. The director, Gakuryu Ishii, had an interview taken with him by one Nell Dahl. In that interview, he mentions how the film's unique atmosphere was a result of his fascination with high diving. One of the main reasons I was drawn to this film was my fascination with the high dive. I often found myself wondering if it was possible to capture the sheer beauty and dynamism of this sport in a feature film. Unlike the colossal rockets that defy the Earth's gravity and soar into space, a high dive is a feat performed by a human being, a flesh and blood individual who launches into space, descends under the Earth's gravity, lands in the water, rises to the surface, and resumes breathing. To me, this is the most exquisite and awe-inspiring sport in the world. He describes that in taking a trip to Indonesia and Thailand, he felt that something fundamental to me, indispensable and absolute, exists here and now. It was very similar to the vibrations emitted by the environment and colors that had already existed. As a matter of course, in the back streets of the city urban corner where I was born and raised, a corner of the city where it went unnoticed. I wonder if it would be possible to create a film as a way to genuinely question what was the true nature of this vibration. When I spoke about Mircea Eliade and his book My Train in my previous video, I discussed how he described this prayer or indispensable vibration of India in much the same way. Interesting enough, that video was about Om Shrinkyo, something which, according to this interview, helped inspire this movie to be made. Well, it originally inspired the director's previous movie, Angel Dust, which was written to be sent out as a warning about the critical atmosphere surrounding Japan and Tokyo. When that same warning became reality, he found everything very bleak. So in his words, I had to express myself through a film to purify people's souls. In the same interview he mentions, unfortunately this film was not a hit in Japan, and is little known outside of a few ardent supporters. Therefore, it has not been possible to make another film like this, except for very small personal independent works. Meaning, despite its esoteric nature and beauty, in my opinion, we'll never see anything like it ever again. And I say that with utmost love, without even being able to get to the beautiful part yet. The film continues as the two boys decide to attend Izumi's high dive competition. The movie is captured in this repetitive, recursive manner here, alternating between the shots and the slow-moving day as the divers perform multiple splashes into the water. It's quite mesmerizing. Soon after the competition ends and Ukiya decides to leave Mao alone with Izumi in the hopes of them growing closer together, we get a few shots of Ukiya and Izumi heading to the Hakata-gyon Yamakasa on the bike and then watching it from afar. The whole scene, like many others, has a spiritual quality to it, not only dictated by the religious nature of the tradition, but by a tribal, almost classic soundtrack that accompanies slow-motion shots of the men carrying the Yamakasa, including Ukiya, which is one of the people right under it. It's also interesting to note the fact that Hakata-gyon Yamakasa is believed to have been a festival which began as a ceremony to get rid of the plague, a fact that is mentioned in a later scene. This yet again has a thematic relevance because of the prevalence of a certain disease which appears in the movie and is even mentioned on the radio earlier on the scene where the boys are on the rooftop. After the festival, Miki drags Ukiya to the side and shows him Izumi's horoscope, and even then we don't quite learn the true nature of what's written on the paper. We finally cut to Izumi and Mao talking exactly about the monk story, but also the disease which is now happening in town, which the people of Hakata have dubbed the turning to stone disease. Soon after, a blinding flash appears from the mountain where the historical site was found, blinding Izumi and causing something to occur within her. She falls to the ground and Mao has to help her up. The next day, the drought continues, melting with the terrible heat, everything. A woman collapses from the stone disease and we finally learn what the terrible thing in Izumi's horoscope was. A shot of Mao holding the paper shows there's a terrible chance of an accident on the 23rd of August, right on the day of the high dive contest. An accident which may result in her death. The two boys meet up and discuss this, but decide to just watch her for now as they realize they cannot do anything. Mao heads home and we see him as he struggles to get any water to wash his face because the drought is still in effect. He starts praying at a shrine dedicated to his younger sister, which appears to have died, and then heads to his room, where he decides to listen to the radio. This is once again one of many quiet moments the movie showcases through his restlessness and the eternal summer heat. The next few days, Mao picks Izumi up from practice with his motorcycle while saying their goodbyes. Izumi kisses him and then proceeds to go up where she looks together with her sister through the petrographs found at the historic site, which appear to show someone high diving, a burst of a supernova, and something called an evaporating stone, followed by a shamanistic ritual. Her sister points out that the signs seem to be concurrent with the events that are happening now, even the two meteorites that have fallen. Like a transitional period of youth and something unnamed that's approaching, this whole event feels uncanny. Again, as I said earlier, this event suggests a pattern of recurrence dictated by a higher cosmic event that human bodies and the ritual responses cannot understand, although they are part of the same cycle. Eventually, the day of the contest comes, and something is definitely wrong with Izumi. She says she isn't feeling well to her instructor, but he just screams at her. And upon throwing herself a second time, the prophecy seems to have become real. As the public awaits, the wait turns to panic, as they notice she isn't surfacing. Mao, in his panic, dives in, and even though he cannot swim, he pulls her up to the surface, finally breaking the mold of his role. If you remember earlier, we discussed how each character's name is symbolic, Mao being true fish, even though he cannot swim, and Izumi's is spring of water or conduit. Even if her name isn't clear yet, the dynamics have been formed. Ukyo's name means the one who floats. He does not and would not descend in the water for Izumi, as opposed to Mao, who in this scene metaphorically surrenders himself, almost sacrificing himself to save her. Mao falls in love with Izumi and swims through the water to save her. Ukiya tries falling in love with her, but leaves her to Mao, and for the rest of the movie he's kind of suspended between the two. The dynamic is formed around that, almost like it's been predestined. After Mao rescues Izumi, she's rushed to the hospital. There, doctors inform her sister that she has fallen into a coma and may not survive. Both the boys are heartbroken by this event, and sitting in the hospital's lobby, Ukiya tells Mao that Miki asked an old shaman to pray for Izumi, drawing a pictogram that is extremely similar to the images presented on the petroglyphs. After learning she may not make it, Mao goes to the courtyard, and upon sitting down he starts hearing the voice of a young girl. His now deceased sister, telling him that he is not to blame. He apologizes to her apparition, although nobody is there saying he couldn't have helped her back then. It is simply presumed that she had drowned because of his inability to swim. The water that once marked failure now becomes the site of partial redemption. He managed to save a person, but did he really? Will she survive? He asks himself the same question, and decides to do as Ukiya said and pray. After he begins praying, we see a scene of a disembodied hand grabbing Izumi's hand in the hospital. Shortly after that, she awakens perfectly fine, even after the accident. Sunny and cloudy days follow as both Izumi and Mao go out together, walking through nature. Although something is odd. She begins talking about how everything feels so strange and new. She recounts a moment in primary school when she started examining her nails and her hair and became suddenly aware of the little parts that form every one of us, down to a subatomic level. She begins describing how increasingly blurred the line became between her and everyday objects as she realized that molecules smaller than air particles are both in and outside her and coexist at the same time with her, as she does. As such, she began seeing this self as someone completely different than the conscious person which she was. Izumi's childhood experience represents a kind of phenomenological breakdown. She becomes hyper-aware of her own materiality to the point where the boundaries of self begin to dissolve. A lot of Merleau-Ponty's ideas about embodiment and perception are presented under the idea, but taken to an almost pathological extreme. She's experiencing what could be called a crisis of subject-object distinction. The realization that at the molecular level there's no clear boundary between her and not her. As such, she ends up depersonalizing because she no longer recognizes the self that which she experiences consciously is somehow separate from or imposed upon the material substrate that constitutes her body. She sees herself as both the conscious observer and the collection of subatomic particles, creating a split that's deeply disorienting. This connects to Buddhist concepts of anatta, non-self, but experienced as existential terror rather than the classic freedom the concept may imply. She begins recognizing material continuity intellectually, the idea that we're all made of the same materials, that we exist and are made of what's around. It creates a desire inside her for experiential continuity, to actually feel that connection rather than just understand it. Her longing represents an attempt to resolve the anxiety of dissolution through deliberate communication, which also ties into theories like the selfish gene, which states we only exist due to the need of the particles inside our beings to exist. All of these factors made her severely anxious, causing her to be scared, so she tried to distract herself from the thought entirely. But this made her lonely. It made her yearn even more for the touch of the trees, the leaves, the ground, the water. She expresses that they all became so dear to her that she wanted to hug every single one of them and forget everything else. But then she awoke from the daydream and realized she was still in the middle of class. Now she's not scared about any of the boundaries anymore. She also recalls that while she was in the coma, she was trying to remember a favor someone had asked of her, but now she can't. She drags Mao into a nearby wooded area and tells him something is coming. She can hear something he cannot. The scene jumps forward to one of the biology classes Izumi is in, where the professor states that humans do nothing for the earth, in relation to the cycle of regrowth and the idea that humans just cause pollution and deforestation. In that 2024 interview I mentioned earlier, the director admits that this was the intended message of the film. He says, the Ainu people, who were the original inhabitants of northern Japan, had the standard rule that if, for example, they caught 3 salmons, they would give 1/3 to God, 1/3 to the bears they coexist with, and who would return it to the earth, and their share would be 1/3. I think we are forgetting the rules and wisdom that are very important for us to live on this earth we've been blessed with. In a way, I understand the idea that our existences have become extractive rather than reciprocal. We take without returning, consume without acknowledging the cycles that sustain us. The Ainu, or the ancient Japanese framework, represents a cosmology where humans exist within ecological systems rather than above them, where giving back is not altruism but structural necessity. Yet the film complicates this seemingly straightforward ecological message through Izumi's earlier confession. If she experienced such profound anxiety upon recognizing her material continuity with the world, and if intellectual awareness of interconnectedness produced more isolation than harmony, then simply knowing we're part of nature's cycle may not be enough to restore balanced participation. The film seems to argue that modern consciousness itself, the very mode of self-awareness that allows Izumi to dissect herself into subatomic particles, is what severs us from intuitive participation in this cycle, creating the existential loneliness she describes and the ecological devastation the professor condemns with such a heavy heart. The professor gives the students the task to describe the relationship between auxins and the refraction of light, but while everyone is writing, Izumi is staring blankly into the distance, at the mountain, almost longing to be there, while drawing circles which look like the molecular structure around the central point, just like a Bohr model. The teacher looks at her as she does it. This moment is solemn, almost like connecting with something more ancient than herself, something far away that she misses and cries for, but it cannot be shown. I also feel the need to mention that I was instantly reminded of a Denpa visual novel when I saw this. Near the start of the story, in Shizuku, one of the characters make similar drawings in their notebook. When I did my Denpa video, I spoke about this in particular, and I was a bit pulled back by the similarities, so I googled it and I found a Reddit post claiming it might be a reference, since Shizuku was released just a year apart from August in the Water. But while we're on the subject of that, fans of the channel know that I am a big fan of Denpa media. In general, it's something that I subconsciously keep coming back to again and again, even if I don't necessarily intend it. Now, one of the questions I thought would be interesting to ask is if August in the water is truly Denpa. If we go by the definition I pushed in that what is Denpa video, however, it's simply Denpa adjacent. There isn't enough of a focus on technology that causes this small scale sort of end of the world scenario. August in the Water is more a movie about nature reclaiming what humanity has taken away from it, nature denying humans the access to water and giving them strange diseases. As she leaves the classroom, we see a shot of her approaching the water pump outside the school, while a boy plays the leitmotif of the main theme on a piano from the inside. She goes and tries hard to make the water flow, but none of it will. She picks up a rock and starts looking at it, accidentally cutting herself on the rock itself while dropping it. When the blood falls upon the rock, water from the pump starts slowly pouring until a constant stream forms. In the same way an equivalent exchange is formed, the blood is traded for the water that satiates her thirst. The ritualistic exchange equivalates the same way the Ainu people's way of life was to give back to the land, to receive more from it. The scene suggests that nature hasn't simply turned off water access due to human transgression, rather that it demands a return to form through a direct physical offering, a return of the body to the cycles. Izumi intellectually understood during her dissociative episode. Her blood on the rock represents the same concepts of material reciprocity as well as the price of separation. I think it's also important to state that her wound was accidental, so the result seems to have happened coincidentally, not in spite of her wish to stop the drought. If you remember, I spoke about how each of the characters' names slowly revealed themselves as the story went on, where her name Izumi, Spring of Water or Conduit, finally becomes relevant here. Apart from the connection through the high diving, she causes the Spring of Water to revitalize. She's both the wound in the earth and the source of healing, just like the rocks that break to reveal the springs and let the water flow. She cuts herself and ends up restarting the flow of water. This connects back to her earlier anxiety about molecular continuity, as she feared recognizing herself as continuous with the world. Yet here that continuity is enacted through violence and flow back to being ambiguous. She may as well be the flowing water, as her particles and atoms get mixed with those of the water flowing on the bloody rock. We see Mao watching from afar. He was the one playing the piano in the classroom. He saw her out of the window and went downstairs only to notice essentially a miracle occurring right before his eyes. We see scenes showing that Izumi can now communicate with the dolphins, and that the stone disease is getting more powerful than before. Izumi seems to have become almost psychic, as she can break the flower pot near her bed without even touching it. Izumi's post-blood sacrifice abilities, all this telepathic communication with dolphins, telekinesis, psychic perception, show that she's become less human and more a conduit for nature's intelligence or will. The dissociative awareness she feared as a child is now manifesting as actual dissolution of human boundaries. She's no longer observing molecular continuity intellectually, she's embodying it. Her consciousness bleeds into the non-human world at an alarming rate. All of these acts appear confusing to the ones around her. When Mao comes to visit her and speaks to her sister Yo, she tells him that their parents died when they were young, so they've always been close. But she's changed much recently, telling him she never speaks to her anymore and acts strange almost all of the time. Izumi seems to be locking herself somewhere far away from human relationships as she delves deeper and connects further with the nature of things around her. The same fears she held as a child come true like some sort of foreshadowing. The loneliness she feared is coming true, but from the opposite direction she expected. We also see a scene closely after this where Mao and Izumi go to the mall together and watch a news report saying that one of the waterfalls near Hakata, which was being boasted for having the largest water flow, is now almost dry. Mao meets with Izumi on the rooftop of the school and the two talk about the fact she can see something in the mountains around the town. As such, the two decide to take a hike together there, in a scene where she begs him to hug her and not let her go. Izumi can sense she's slipping away, descending somewhere far, into the mountains, into whatever the stone circle represents, into a state beyond human embodiment. She's asking Mao to anchor her to human intimacy before she's pulled entirely into the ecological transformation she's becoming part of. Just like her childhood desire to hug the trees and ground, she now has one for human touch, to remember she's human, one to help remind her she's human, that the particles near her come from humans. Mao and Izumi later hike to the mountains. On the way there, they meet two old men who are filming a documentary, which warn them about the dangers of going to the source of the stone circle. At the center of the circle is a large round boulder, its surface carved with petrographs resembling those shown in Yo's husband research, and even in Izumi's drawings. The place is set out like the structure of an atom. On the way there, they pass by a woman setting candles down at the shrine. Something feels ominous, as all the animals of the forest seem to be following them with their eyes, almost like they're approaching a forbidden place, a node of power of some sorts, a place where consciousness of both animals and humans no longer distinguish themselves. The rock-like structure seems to vibrate with energy. Izumi looks up at the sky and sets her head down on the rock. Mao follows through and does the same. The both of them go and look at the spring, the same spring they saw on the news at the mall, which is clearly affected by drought. Nature seems to be withdrawing its resources from human accessible areas toward the sacred site. As we see shots of the almost full moon and of the shrine inside Mao's house, we learn that one of the meteorites that fell was stolen and one of the professors called Takigawa, who was in charge of researching it, was killed with a rock. A bit ironic considering the situation. The professor was killed with a rock for the meteorite, an act of violence enacted through the very matter, the stone, that's diseasifying humanity. Someone is trying to control or harness whatever the meteorites represent, likely understanding their key to the transformation occurring or being completed. After hearing the news, Mao receives a phone call from a worried Yo, who tells him she hasn't seen Izumi in a while. He storms off on his bike, frantically searching for her. When he's unable to find her at any of their usual spots, he rushes back to her house, where he meets up with Yo. There, he notices a framed photograph of the stones on Mount Miko and immediately realizes where Izumi has gone. Racing toward the mountain, he sees police cars speeding in the same direction. The night stillness shatters as crowds gather at the shrine in growing panic. The two elderly documentary filmmakers Mao and Izumi encountered earlier confirm what Mao feared all along. The suspect now possesses both meteorites, which may mean Izumi might meet him and get killed in the process. Mao decides to climb the mountain alone in the dead of the night, his climb almost holding a sort of shamanistic appeal to it, the lone seeker ascending the sacred mountain in darkness to confront cosmic forces. The next scene shows the site of the rock surrounded by glowing mushrooms. The suspect arrives with only one meteorite and a third thing. One meteorite already being there. The mushrooms here are an interesting addition, being plants that require lots of water and darkness to exist. They've all formed around this presumably humid rock. Their bioluminescence here marks this space as fundamentally other, a zone where normal physical laws are suspended. The suspect places the meteorite on the rock and water-like glowing appears on his face, almost like the light is refracting. When the camera cuts to what's in front of him, we see Izumi covered by the dark. She slowly extends her hands as the soundtrack's crescendo reaches its peak, in an extremely creepy melody. Izumi is that water, that source that no longer is a human being. She extends her hands in a hug, almost recalling all of the previous scenes. Her need to hug the earth and the trees, her need to hug Mao, and the classical imagery of divine or demonic figures beckoning, tempting the naive. The next morning, the police arrive to the mountains, led by two filmmakers and a search dog. Along with them is Mao, too, Ukiya as well. When they arrive, Mao gets terrified by the scene, the man holding Izumi, her holding both the meteorites in a hug. He wakes up and looks at the policeman, at Mao, at Ukiya, as time almost seems to freeze. Izumi has become the living nexus between cosmic and terrestrial forces, literally embracing the extraterrestrial objects while held by another transformed human. But even then, her role isn't complete. The following day, Yo decides to visit Izumi in the hospital and speaks with Mao, observing that the entire town feels like it's turned to stone, due to the prolonged drought. She mentions that Izumi warned her to stay away from computers, claiming they make people vulnerable to the stone disease. Almost like technology and nature aren't opposed but parallel paths towards the same transformation, both representing the dissolution of bounded human consciousness, whether into silicon networks or mineral structures. Yo then recounts a dream she had on the way to the hospital, one so vivid that upon waking up she couldn't speak. A cosmic revelation, a sign sent from somewhere far. Something so specific it couldn't have been not a truth. She says, in the dream people didn't need water anymore. People's minds became computer chips made of stone. The computer was connected to the universe. She uses the word Denpa here, which is why this movie may be classified as Denpa genre. But even leaving that apart, the theming is quite literally technological, which made it easy to transport your mind instantly to the moon. One could talk to anyone or aliens anywhere, anytime through the chip. That made me happy. Then I awoke and started thinking about the stone disease. I think we came from another part of the universe to Earth, a long time ago. But we want to go back home again. In order to return, we have to turn ourselves to stone. You see, the liquid water only exists on Earth. In the distant future, a miracle may take place where a man made of water may be brought to life again. The dream turns the film's original, apparent ecological message that nature is punishing humanity for environmental destruction into something much stranger. Humanity's alienation from nature isn't a moral failure, but an ontological condition. We're literally aliens beings trapped in water-based biological forms, and the stone disease represents our species unconsciously attempting to return to our original cosmic state. Izumi warns her that getting close to the computer might turn you to stone faster, exactly because of the idea that minds are becoming more like computer chips made of stone. Both technologies, the organic and the artificial, represent the same thing, a consciousness freed from wet, bounded existence. Yo's dream presents this as utopian instant telepathic communication across cosmic distances, connection with aliens, transportation to the moon without physical travel. It's a vision of total connectivity that requires abandoning the isolated water-dependent self, the corpse of the living. The final part of the dream is what confuses me the most. In the distant future, a miracle may take place where a man made of water may be brought to life again. This tells us that maybe this transformation state occurs in waves, almost like water. It's happened before and it will happen again. Just as Izumi experienced dissociative awareness of her molecular continuity, humanity might cycle between states, water-based biological consciousness and stone-based networked consciousness. Water only exists on Earth, because it represents the exceptional temporary state elsewhere in the universe. Consciousness exists only in mineral forms. This changes completely the meaning of Izumi's childhood flashbacks. Her anxiety about the molecular boundaries were actually species memory surfacing recognition that our current form is artificial. Her desire to hug the trees and ground was nostalgia for mineral existence. Her blood sacrifice that restored water flow wasn't appeasement to nature, but a catalyst, mixing her liquid biology with stone to enable transformation. The meteorites are, as such, homing beacons, objects from our actual cosmic origin, calling us back to rejoin them. The film is about ontological incompatibility. We're water beings on a water planet, but we don't belong here. Our environmental destruction might be unconscious sabotage, an attempt to make Earth inhospitable to our current form, so we're forced to return to our stone state, to the technological and the spiritual. Izumi is now in a mental hospital. She was brought here after being found with the suspect. The doctors show Mao and Yo an interview in which Izumi says that she was there because she had to persuade him. He's from the Stone Tribe. When the doctor asks what the Stone Tribe is, she answers, one of the stone beings keeping the order of atomic energy. The doctor proceeds to ask, but isn't he human? She answers he only takes that form, but he belongs to the stone tribe. The doctor is concerned about her and tells Dio that the only logical diagnosis is sudden schizophrenia caused by the shock from the diving accident, and he hopes these delusions are just temporary. Izumi speaks with the same calm rationality she exhibited throughout the film, but now she's describing an ontology that contradicts consensus reality. The doctor diagnoses sudden schizophrenia triggered by her diving accident, hoping these delusions are temporary. His explanation is perfectly reasonable within materialist psychiatry, traumatic brain injury, producing paranoid ideation and taxonomic confusion. But it poses a greater question that I feel like the director is addressing to the audience. How do we distinguish between madness and perception of non-human reality? Is everything that sounds crazy insane by principle? We should be on the side of the doctor, but the film has shown us everything Izumi describes as real. Her blood sacrifice causing the water to flow, her telepathic communication with dolphins, her psychokinetic abilities, the vibrating energy at the stone circle, the suspect's transformation under water light. From the audience privileged position, we know she's not delusional. She's become perceptually transparent to realities invisible to ordinary consciousness. The institutional response to her knowledge is confinement and pathologization, impeding her from saving all of them. The video keeps playing in the background as Izumi says, "The beings of stone are undetectable right now. Many people will be sacrificed. The stone tribe want to take over. They want to return everything from earth back to stone." The doctor in the video asks, "Are you still trying?" And she answers, "I have to take strong measures." The language she uses, strong measures, makes it seem like she's fighting some sort of invisible war against this stone tribe, maybe in an attempt to keep those molecules she's fascinated with intact. But given Yo's dream theory that we're aliens beings trying to return home, Izumi might actually be fighting against our species' evolutionary destiny, attempting to keep humanity trapped in biological form against the universe's will, because it's what grants us free will and the ability to connect to the nature around us. Shortly after her release, an interview circulates describing her abilities and claims. Ukiya reads it out loud to classmates, and its contents reveal how Izumi's knowledge has been simultaneously validated and sensationalized, or maybe perhaps mocked by the press. The article is read by Ukiya to his classmates. And now, she's even able to communicate with a divine voice. She only uses telepathy. In this way, she learned the cause of the stone disease and the water shortage that are affecting Genkai City. According to Izumi, the explosion of supernova caused the dislocation of the planetary positions, which changed the intensity of the magnetic field at Mount Miko. This in turn has ultimately led to the mysterious incidents there. She said strong measures should be taken to normalize the intensity of the magnetic field and the cosmic energy. Izumi arrives at school as well, and she's watched by Ukiya and his other classmates from afar. From behind them, Mao comes and rips the newspapers out of their hands, trying to punch Ukiya while yelling at him, "You're the one who told the reporter." In a surprising turn of events, these things weren't told by Izumi herself, but by Ukiya to the press. The boys come along to try and break them up. Miki intervenes and manages to stop the fighting, and then Izumi herself comes out of the classroom. The whole school is gathered around them. Mao yells, "Get out of here," tries to make them leave, and then he himself leaves. He's followed by Izumi, who tells him it's her fault for what has happened. He proposes taking her home, but she oddly says she is now scared of the bike and will walk home on her own. Earlier in the film, Mao's bike represented human-scale movement, the ability to traverse space through mechanical extension of the body, controlled and comprehensible. Izumi's sudden fear of it suggests she's losing connection with human technology and human velocity, walking direct contact between feet and earth. Slower, more vulnerable is all she can tolerate now. The sun blazes with the power of thousands as the drought seemingly gets worse. Thousands of people fall to the stone disease, and in the body, sclerosis is found in the cranial nerves. As Mao rides around town, people fall like flies all around him. A narration starts playing over this, one done by Miki. In the year when the people neglected the god of water, 2 stones fell to the ground. After, a flash in heaven. Water supplies fail, and the village is seized with stone disease. A person chosen to restore the balance performed an old traditional ceremony on a night with full moon. We shift to a scene of Miki and the 2 boys in her shop, Ukiya and Mao. She says that this case, which may have happened in India long ago is oddly similar to theirs. She doesn't know anything about the ceremony, but she has a strange feeling that Izumi may be in trouble. The next day, Izumi's sister collapses and is brought into the hospital. Mao comes visit Izumi, but she's been tranquilized because she was getting spasms. She tells him the uterus becomes hardened like stone. She wanted a baby so badly. I can wait no longer. It's time to take action. I have to do it. She then gets up from her bed and quickly leaves the room. She seems to be walking somewhere. Mao tries to stop her, but she pushes him aside and keeps walking. She runs outside and is quickly followed by him. He keeps asking, "What's wrong with you, Izumi? Where are you going?" At this point, Mao tackles her and starts slapping her, telling her to wake up, and telling her that what she's hearing isn't real, to which she responds, "I must do it," and begins walking towards the water. From Mao's perspective, Izumi is experiencing psychotic break, responding to auditory hallucinations, and is trying to shock her back to consensual reality through physical intervention, the desperate logic of someone watching a loved one walk toward annihilation. But Izumi simply doesn't care. A shot of the moon shows us it is now full, the same full moon which occurred in the ancient story. Just as the ancient myth described, the Chosen One performs the ceremony when lunar forces peak. Izumi walking toward water despite sedation, despite physical assault. She's responding to the same gravitational pull that moves tides, the same celestial mechanisms that govern planetary motion. She walks into the water, deeper and deeper. Mao jumps in the water for her and begins walking for her, screaming, "Izumi!" She turns, and it's quiet. She begins talking telepathically with him, ruminating on why she survived the accident, why everything felt new to her, because she was supposed to die back there. She says she has something to do, to set herself free, and thanks him, telling him he will see her whenever he wishes to meet. Mao is stunned, watching her go deeper into the water and eventually simply fade. The moon hides between the mountains in a beautiful and tragic moment as Mao remains alone. The sky fills with storm clouds as morning breaks. Mao runs through the forest, climbing higher and higher, breaking through foliage as thunder announces what's coming. He reaches the stone circle, just as the downpour begins, nature releasing all its held water at once. We see Ukia at school, delighted he can finally flush the toilet, everyone celebrating the rain's return. The police arrive at Mount Miko to find Mao shirtless, embracing the sacred rock. As they lift him away, water forms rivers, streams jump back to life, and the natural cycle resumes their eternal flow. Everything jumps back to life. Izumi's sacrifice worked. She gave herself, her water-based consciousness, her liquid body, her bounded self back to the cosmos, and in return, water returned to Earth. The exchange the Ainu understood, the reciprocity the director invoked, was enacted, not through changed behavior, but through literal self-offering. 1/3 of the gods, and Izumi became that third. She became a martyr, one who lives in a higher state now. A news report mentions Izumi still missing, and Mao was found at the site of Mount Miko, where he was found suffering from amnesia. Miki and Ukia visit Mao in the hospital, where they assure him everything will be okay. But he doesn't really care. He's just watching the rain pour outside and the mountain in the distance. His narration reveals what happened after. The heavy rain purified the town, the stone disease passed, and a rainbow appeared leading to the mountain. The petroglyphs Miki discovered became subject of television discussion. Scholars arrived, including Yo's husband, to study the site. Mao joined as a volunteer observer, then became a devoted researcher, discovering the area contained an unusual amount of energy. The rest of the movie discusses this, Mao's life after his separation with Izumi, after the fish was ripped from water, split away from his living essence. Yo awakens and gives birth, her petrified womb somehow restored, human reproduction made possible again. She gives Mao Izumi's journal, which reveals that When she first fell into the water tank, the dolphin told her about the perfect balance. Everything that followed was Izumi slowly understanding what that balance required and finally having the courage to become it. Mao dedicates himself to studying sacred sites across the world, using Izumi's diary as his guide, working with Pan-Pacific scholars to understand the cosmological patterns she glimpsed. But as years pass, his memories of her fade. Not amnesia now, but the natural erosion of time. He meets a woman, marries, grows old. His voice becomes that of an elderly man, reflecting that so many things happen in my life, it's hard to quantify. The stone circle is now a tourist attraction called Hazuki Circle, in translation, August Circle, named after the month when everything changed. Mao, now frail and suffering from brain disease, returns to visit. When he arrives and touches the rock, he feels suddenly free, as though freed from Earth's gravity. He lies down facing the sky. Sometimes I become uncertain if it was real, dream or just memories, and whether I'm alive or not. He speaks with a heavy voice, of someone wise, someone frail, someone who wishes for more, someone that wants the same thing I do. A connection above himself, the life of the afterlife, not confined to religion but to a serious existence, that of water, that flow of life and all in between. Flashes flood back of his time in August, maybe 60 or so years ago, the bluest water, rainbows, reflecting light, the splash Izumi made when jumping, the storm, the fall, everything. His memories return like a waterfall, in an ultimate moment of beauty. His retina perceives the sky as an ethereal heaven, as he's taken away by its vastness, unmoving. He watches it absorbed by it, as he spends the night. It no longer feels like he exists in this reality. August in the water refuses the comfort of meaning that human consciousness demands. It presents a cosmos indifferent to individual desires, where love cannot overcome cosmic necessity, where the most profound act of environmental restoration requires complete self-annihilation. Izumi didn't save the world through heroism, she became the mechanism through which impersonal forces rebalance themselves. It's a film about the loneliness of knowing we don't belong here, the terror of recognizing we're already dissolving, and the unbearable beauty of finally letting ourselves flow. In the final scene, somewhere far away, Mao sits up on the rock. Rain hits his face, his saddened, sullen face, while someone appears off screen. It's Izumi. She extends her hands to him one last time. They embrace and both fade with the rain, leaving behind a beautiful summer scene, emptied of them, like the month of August dissolving into water, like a tear in the wind, like water dissolving into the hot summer earth. He fades from this earth to ascend to a higher plane of existence, living this life. Beautiful as it was, empty, his existence does not matter to the earth. As nature joys in this sun rays, the sight remains quiet, one last time.